Hello, I'm Alise Chapins, and I'm here today with Ed Cunningham, the director of the documentary Arcades and Love Songs, The Ballad of Walter Day. Thank you so much for speaking with me today, Ed.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. So first, I need to know, has Taylor Swift seen the movie?
Not that we know of.
Okay.
Yeah, it
Well,
was such an organic, Walter, when he was struggling with writing lyrics, he'd written these songs had, well, come to him in his, after his heartbreak in the 80s. And, he had the melodies, he had the harmonies, he sort of had, the chorus is down, but not all of the verses. And so he went searching for people that, could give him inspiration. And it was so endearing when we walked in one day filming with him and he just turned around from his computer and he had these videos of Taylor Swift up and he turned and he says, "Have you ever heard of Taylor Swift?" And it was just this really pure moment where this guy in his 70s found one of the biggest pop stars in the world to give him the final motivation to write his songs. And then he studied her and her performance videos on how to move when he was giving his performance because he had never performed before, not once before we filmed that in the movie. And so it was a really organic moment that, I knew we had to have it in the film because she really did matter. Taylor Swift really did matter to Walter in how he performed and his lyrics. And any Swiftie who has seen the movie immediately walks up and says, "Oh my God, she's got to see this. She's got to see it. She's going to love it." Because it's such an organic, warm, loving view of her and also just respect for what she does on a level that, I think most people know, oh, she's a pop star and she's got a lot of fans, but she really is a good song crafter. She's a great performer. And it was really fun to see Walter, this 73-year-old guy at the time, just dive right in and become a Swiftie.
absolutely. Yeah, I loved that bit. So Arcades and Love Songs is this kind of follow-up to The King of Kong, which is just such an iconic documentary. So how did you kind of go about continuing to tell that story about Walter Day without just making basically, the same film a second time?
Yeah, that's, when we first started talking about doing the film, there was nobody on our side that had any interest in doing King of Kong 2.
Right.
There's been a lot of things that have happened. There was lawsuits and the cheating scandal that's in this film, but it's more about how it impacted Walter's life and his goal to be a singer-songwriter. So there was really no interest in doing King of Kong 2. And for me, this was a chance for me to look at a different story. I mean, this is a completely different movie than King of Kong. King of Kong was a very, we based it off of an 80s sports drama, basically.
Right.
Whereas this is really about a singer-songwriter late in life finally taking his shot, singing his songs, getting up in front of friends and family in public and singing. And so for us, there was no interest in doing a second follow-up to King of Kong, although there is a story there.
Mhm.
But really, for us, we always loved Walter. We always saw the goodness in his heart. We always knew that, for me, he was probably the most interesting character in King of Kong.
Mm.
And in the King of Kong, he makes the statement and he shares the dream that he doesn't want to be this video game referee anymore, that he wants to sing his songs and be an artist. So the tie-in was really natural from King of Kong because he had shared that dream in the film of doing this. And the full circle is it was fans of King of Kong that ended up funding his album and the production of his album. So that was really kind of, for me, that was really the kind of linchpin, like, oh, okay. So the film had all, the King of Kong had all of this good, bad, otherwise, but here were these fans, these diehard fans of this movie who, when they met him, they said, "Hey, whatever happened to those songs that you talked about?" And Walter said, "Oh, other things have gotten in the way. I've been traveling around at these conventions." And they said, "Well, what if we pay for it?" And so in July of 2022, I heard about the album being made, and we started filming in August of 2022 to make sure we could capture his journey in the studio, and then as he worked to perform the concert that's at the end of the movie.
Yeah, yeah. Uh, the relationship between Billy and Walter is this really kind of surprising, but really sweet one. Can you talk about the influence that they've had on each other over the years that you've known them?
Yeah, when I first started thinking about making this movie, one of my, I don't want to say concerns, but one of my hesitations was, Billy had this persona back when we filmed with him in 2005 and 2006, and you just couldn't overcome the Billiness of Billy. And what I found this time was a more humble person, a more warm person, and someone who truly has been a good friend to Walter. When Walter was sued, it was Billy and his son, also Billy, who's in the movie, who put together a team of people. They got the lawyer for him, they helped pay for the lawyer, they helped the strategy. So when I saw that, I realized, Walter had built this community of gamers. This was his invention. And that community, Billy Mitchell, Steve Sanders, who's in the original film, the fans from King of Kong that funded the album, the Color Switch mobile game guy. And to me, it really be about Walter built this community and now he needed their help. And boy, did they come through, especially Billy. Billy was just, he was a different guy this time. He was supportive. He was responsive. He loved the fact that we were making a movie about Walter and not him. He said, "You've already made a movie about me. I'm not going to let you make another one." And he didn't really like how the first one turned out. But we had to get through some of that stuff. There were some hard feelings about King of Kong from both Walter and Billy.
Mm.
And I had to prove that my heart was in the right place, that I was there to document the friendship. And, we love the friendship of Billy and Walter in this movie because it's quirky and funny and strange, and they travel to these conventions together, and they're the King of Kong guys. And so for us, that was really something we could sink our teeth into as storytellers. That you can think whatever you want of Billy, but he's been a very good friend to Walter over the years, and that was really needed while Walter was fighting this lawsuit and trying to make his music.
Yeah. One of my, just kind of speaking of like the broader community, one of my favorite scenes in the movie is the scene where they go to the community college that had just started the esports team, and just hearing Amber talk about how that had changed her life. I think it just speaks really beautifully to the way that our legacy might not be what we anticipate it being, but it doesn't make it less impactful. Can you just talk about filming that scene in particular and like Walter's response to all of that?
Yeah, when you're making I don't know, this is 9 or 10 documentaries for me. There's always 4 or 5 moments where you find yourself in a room and something starts happening that is special. It's unique, and you have to film it. But you also, once you have it filmed, it's like, all right, how does this fit into our story? And Marshalltown Community College, when we went there, and they had this Father of Esports event, to see all of those kids come into that room in their jerseys for their teams, for me, it became this really deep way to show Walter's impact. Because it's one thing to say, "Oh, he's the father of esports." Well, what does that mean? And Amber Lauthers, who is the young woman you were talking about, when we sat down to interview her, and it was funny because um, the esports coach said, "Well, Amber's kind of shy. She's not very talkative." We got her on camera and she couldn't stop talking about Walter. And it was just so sweet because, here's this young woman who was struggling. She was struggling finding her own community. She was a gamer, but a girl. So she always felt like an outsider. And then she found this esports team. Her grades improved. She became more social. She made lifelong friends. And so when we were able to sit down with her and interview her, I just knew that that scene would mean a lot because here's this young woman that represents millions of kids around the world and especially in our country who, maybe they struggle socially and they can't find the right group, but that esports team for Amber became her, it became her place. It became the place where she felt like she could be herself. And it's funny, I'm getting emotional now. It was one of the sweetest moments I've ever had in filmmaking to have this young woman who clearly is shy, a little awkward, didn't fit in, and she found this place that was her home. And that was what really for us gave us the ability to show the audience, okay, this is what Walter did.
Mhm.
Okay, you can just in a bubble say, oh, he's the father of esports. But really that scene at Marshalltown Community College and with Amber really made it human and brought it to life in a way that without her, that scene would have been great and it'd have been cool to see him be honored as the esports guy. But to hear her narrate it and talk about her experience was really special. And I think it gave a heart and a soul to what Walter did as the father of esports.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, like I said, I mean, it was one that definitely made me cry in the movie. So yeah, it's very impactful. Kind of switching gears a little bit. Uh, I think the interactions with Shane are just so interesting. Yeah, kind of go through this relationship where there's just this genuine affection. Can you just talk about shooting the interviews with Shane in particular? Because I just thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, it's 20 years ago this spring that we first flew to Iowa and filmed with Walter for The King of Kong. So it's been a long time. And I have been hearing about this woman who broke his heart and inspired all of these songs that he started hearing in his head. So it was always just this sort of mythical figure. And Walter called me one day when we started filming. He said, "Hey, I was going to ask the woman who broke my heart to be in the movie. Do you think that's a good idea?" And of course, I'm like, "Yes, it's a great idea." But, this is a woman who did break his heart and was willing to come interview with us and talk about that and be very open and incredibly vulnerable with what they went through all those years ago. And she had no idea that Walter felt this way. She had no idea that Walter had written all these songs about her.
Yeah.
Yeah, so when Shane went over to Walter's house, and it was in this tiny room, so only the guy working the camera could go in there. I had to sit in the hallway while that was going on.
Hmm.
And to see two people talk about a breakup that was really hurtful and really, hurt Walter. And to see, I mean, we filmed a reconciliation in a way that, when Mike J. Nichols, the editor, put together the scene for the first time and showed it to me, I just thought this is like the greatest breakup reconciliation scene that I've ever seen in this documentary about a video game icon who wants to be a singer-songwriter. And really, everyone involved who, when we showed them that scene, they said this changes the whole movie. It
Hmm.
gives it so much depth, so much humanity. And, if she hadn't, I thought about this recently, if she hadn't participated, I just don't think we would have the depth and the humanity in this movie that we have. And so I'm really thankful for her for allowing us to interview her. And then, on top of it, she's just got this energy. She's just open and, vulnerable and honest and well spoken and articulate. And so, in all the screenings that we've had, that scene and her changes the whole temperature of the audience. They're going along having a good time and it's funny and it's interesting and oh, this guy's going to do his music. And then Shane, the woman who broke his heart, shows up in the movie and it just drops it down to a whole different level of depth for people. And it becomes, at the end of the screening, it becomes kind of the biggest thing people talk about is this woman that she participated. And it's really fascinating. The audiences have been a little split. Some people are like, oh, she broke his heart. She's a bad person. And then other people are like, no, this is great. She admitted, she took ownership of what she did. So honestly, that's what we were after. We wanted people to have their own opinion about what happened. But Shane, the muse, so to speak, being involved, I think really changes this movie. And I think it makes it much broader too, where King of Kong was mostly for gamers. This is a very broad story. Anybody who's been through heartbreak, anybody who's had their heart broken or broken someone else's heart can really get behind this movie.
Yeah, absolutely. Walter is interesting because he seems like this kind of like study in contradictions. And I can't decide if he's somebody who wants to be in the spotlight or not. Because he takes all these really public facing kind of positions and has been the star in two documentaries. But he also like takes this concert and turns it into this Q&A and brings people in. And we see that so much with him. So can you just kind of talk about what you've seen with him, having worked with him for so many years?
Yeah, there's just this, and it's, we talk about it in the movie. It's like he's always yearned for the spotlight. He's always wanted to be the star, but then he'll push someone else out to the front of the stage. And he struggled a bit with, oh, this is my turn. This is my turn to do this. And we had a lot of conversations getting ready for that show where it was almost like I had to give him permission to
Mm.
be that person and say, Walter, it's okay. You've worked for this. These songs are beautiful. I've been hearing these songs for 20 years. They're beautiful songs. He's a really great songwriter. And, they really stick with you.
Mm.
And so there did have to be a little bit of overcoming that. And he doesn't have, it's not stage fright because he's been on stage thousands of times in his life, but in a different role. And I will share that. And I think you remember when Walter first walks on the stage for that show, he completely froze. I
Yeah.
mean, he froze. And I was in the back of the room. We've got 6 cameras running. I'm like, oh my God, this is going to be a disaster. But what was beautiful about being in that room was all of the people that were there: Billy Mitchell, Steve Sanders, the guys from Color Switch who paid for his album, his community in Fairfield, Iowa. They were his energy. They were his confidence. And you could just see as he started talking to them Q&A, hey, you did great on that one. You're going to do better on the next one. And he really took that. And by the end, when he played the encore of that beautiful song, Hold Me, he was in tune. His voice sounded the best it sounded all night. He remembered all his lyrics. He was on his marks. And I remember just this sigh of relief of, oh my God, thank you that he had a good show. But that's what was nice about it. And I hope that we've conveyed in the film. It came from that community that he had been pushing on into the spotlight his whole life. And they turned around and said, no, 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 it's your turn. We believe in you. And you could see him just grow and get confident. It was really beautiful to be in that room. Scary at first. I'm wondering if we're going to have a train wreck for the end of our movie, which we did for a while. But it was really lovely to see that the community he had built and supported came out and fully supported him.
Yeah. Yeah. So, just as we're kind of wrapping up here, what would be the takeaway that you would want somebody to have if they go and they watch Arcades and Love Songs?
I think it's about chasing your dreams, and it's never too late. We all have that, oh, I want to write this book, or I want to go on this great trip, or maybe I want to reconcile with someone that I hurt years ago. I think the biggest message is it's never too late. It's never too late to do what you want to do, to chase your dreams. I mean, this guy, he was 73 years old when we started filming. And, I'd kind of lost track of that. I've just known him for so long. I just didn't think of his age. And we were doing test screenings. One of the people who watched it called me and said, this is extraordinary. You never see a person this old completely throw caution to the wind and do something that they've wanted to do their whole life. So I think that's really it, is don't give up. It's always possible. And also the doing of it is the accomplishment. If you write a book, if your dream has been to write a book your whole life, it doesn't matter if it sells 1 million copies. It matters that you wrote the book. And that's why I think it's a really important moment at the end of the show. The first person who walks onto the stage is Billy Mitchell. And all he says is, you did it. And that's the message. He did it.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you so much for speaking with me today. I really appreciate it. It's a fantastic film, and yeah, I'm excited for people to get to see it.
Great. Thank you, Alise.
Thank you.